Most of what you have heard about inherited IRAs in the last few years is bad news. The Secure Act of 2019 eliminated what estate planners used to call the stretch IRA, replacing it with a 10-year rule that forces most non-spouse beneficiaries to drain an inherited IRA within a decade of the original owner's death. For anyone who inherits an IRA today, the message has been consistent and grim. You have 10 years, so plan carefully, expect a tax hit. But here is something almost nobody tells you. If you inherited an IRA before January 1st of 2020, you are covered under the old rules. The Pre-Secure Act stretch provisions still apply to you, and they will apply to you for the rest of your life. You are grandfathered into a system that Congress eliminated for everyone else. And that grandfather clause is quietly one of the most valuable tax benefits a retiree can have in 2026. Yet many of the retirees who qualify do not fully understand what they have, how to protect it, and what could accidentally disqualify them. If you inherited an IRA before 2020, this video is for you. Your old stretch rules are a form of tax shelter that no amount of new planning can replicate, and you need to know exactly how to use them. This video is for educational purposes only and is not personalized tax, financial, or legal advice. Consult a qualified professional for guidance on your specific situation. Inherited IRA rules are some of the most complex provisions in the tax code, and the interaction between the old rules, the Secure Act, the Secure Act 2.0, and the IRS regulations finalized in 2024, has created a landscape where professional advice is especially valuable. What I describe here is general information based on publicly available guidance. Let me start by being specific about who qualifies. If the original IRA owner, the person you inherited from, died on or before December 31st, 2019, and you were named as a beneficiary, you are operating under the Pre-Secure Act rules. These rules allow you to take required minimum distributions from the inherited IRA based on your own life expectancy, calculated using the single life table in IRS publication 590B. That is the stretch IRA. You can take small distributions over decades, potentially over 30, 40, even 50 years, depending on your age when you inherited, letting the rest of the account grow tax-deferred for a traditional IRA or tax-free for a Roth IRA. Consider Helen. She inherited her father's traditional IRA in 2015 when he passed away at age 84. Helen was 57 at the time. The account held $300,000. Under the pre-secure rules, Helen's first RMD in 2016 was based on her age at the end of that year, 58, with a life expectancy factor of 27.0 from the single life table. That meant she had to take about $11,100 in the first year. Each year, she reduces the divisor by 1, so the distribution slowly grows as a percentage of the remaining balance, but because the account continues to grow, the dollar amount stays manageable. In 2026, at age 68, her divisor is about 18, meaning she must distribute 1/18 of the balance. If the balance has grown to $400,000 despite distributions, that is about $22,000, much of which can be reinvested in a taxable brokerage account if she does not need it to live on. Helen will continue distributing over her projected lifespan, and if she lives to 90, the account may still have assets in it when she passes, which her own beneficiaries can then inherit under the current rules. Compare that to her cousin Thomas, who inherited his mother's IRA in 2021 after the Secure Act took effect. The Secure Act applies to his inheritance. Thomas must empty the account within 10 years, regardless of his age or life expectancy. If the account was $300,000 when he inherited it, he must take an average of at least $30,000 a year to clear it in 10 years. And because the account is still growing, he will likely need to take more. The 10-year ramp lands squarely during his peak earning years, pushing him into a higher tax bracket each year of distribution. Thomas and Helen have similar family circumstances, but the 5-year difference in when their parents passed away creates a dramatically different tax burden. Helen's annual tax impact stays manageable. Thomas's balloons. This is why, if you inherited before 2020, you are genuinely lucky, and why you need to protect what you have. The first thing to understand is that the grandfathering is tied to the date of death, not to the date you opened the inherited IRA or the date you started taking distributions. If the original owner died in 2015, 2018, or any date in 2019, you are in. If they died on January 1st of 2020 or later, you are not, and the 10-year rule applies to you. The second thing to understand is that the grandfathering applies to the original beneficiary relationship. If you inherited from your father, you can stretch distributions over your lifetime, but if you pass away while still holding the inherited IRA, your own beneficiaries, the so-called successor beneficiaries, are subject to the Secure Act rules. They must empty the account within 10 years of your death. The stretch does not pass down generations indefinitely anymore. It stops with you. This creates important planning implications. Some retirees in this position are strategically accelerating distributions. to reduce the eventual 10-year compression on their own beneficiaries, while others are leaving it alone to maximize the growth during their own lifetime. The right strategy depends on your marginal tax bracket, your beneficiaries' tax brackets, and your estate planning goals. The third thing to understand is that your RMD calculation, under the old rules, uses the single life table in a specific way. The IRS published a reset of the tables in 2022 to reflect longer life expectancies, and if you inherited before 2020, you're entitled to use the reset tables for your ongoing calculations. Some custodians did not automatically update, so retirees who started taking stretch distributions before the reset should check that their custodian is using the correct updated divisor. A failure to use the updated table means you are taking slightly higher distributions than required. Not a tax disaster, but a lost opportunity to leave more in the tax-deferred account. The fourth thing to understand is the severe penalty for failing to take a required minimum distribution. Under Secure Act 2.0, the old 50% excise tax on a missed RMD was reduced to 25%, and further reduced to 10% if corrected within a correction window. But even 10 or 25% of a missed distribution is a significant penalty. Form 5329 is used to report missed RMDs and request a waiver of the penalty, which the IRS will often grant if you can show the missed distribution was due to reasonable error and has been corrected. Still, the cleanest path is to never miss an RMD in the first place. Set up automatic distributions from your custodian if your account is with a brokerage that offers this feature. Now let me walk through a few traps specific to inherited IRAs under the old rules. Trap number 1. Moving the account to a new custodian incorrectly. Inherited IRAs have specific titling rules. The account must be titled something like Helen, as beneficiary of John, deceased. If you move the account and it gets retitled as your own IRA, you have accidentally converted an inherited IRA into your own IRA, which is a taxable event for the entire account balance. This is especially a risk when a beneficiary is a spouse, because spouses have the option to roll the inherited IRA into their own IRA. But if you are a non-spouse beneficiary, that option is not available, and an accidental rollover creates a catastrophic tax bill. Always confirm with the new custodian that the account will be opened and maintained as a beneficiary IRA. Trap number 2, combining inherited IRAs from different decedents. If you inherited an IRA from your father in 2015 and another from your mother in 2017, those are two separate inherited IRAs and must be maintained as separate accounts. You cannot combine them. The RMD calculation for each is based on the decedent's relationship to you and the date they passed. Custodians sometimes mistakenly merge accounts, and that creates tax complications that can be difficult to unwind. Trap number 3, not designating your own beneficiaries on the inherited IRA. Because the inherited IRA is still an IRA, it needs its own beneficiary designation. Otherwise, at your death, it passes through your estate rather than directly to the beneficiaries you intended. Passing through an estate can trigger faster distribution rules and unnecessary probate costs. Every inherited IRA you hold should have its own. Named beneficiaries, reviewed and updated as life circumstances change. Trap number 4, converting an inherited traditional IRA to an inherited Roth IRA. This is not allowed under current law. Beneficiaries cannot convert inherited traditional IRAs to Roth. The conversion option is reserved for account owners during their own lifetime. Some retirees try this and create a mess that takes years to unwind with the IRS. Trap number 5. Assuming that because you are under the old rules, nothing about your inherited IRA has changed. The IRS finalized regulations in 2024 that clarified several aspects of inherited IRA treatment. Some aspects of your planning, such as the use of updated life expectancy tables, changed as a result. You should review your inherited IRA strategy with a tax professional, at least every few years, to make sure you're still applying the correct rules. Let me give you another specific example. Beatrice inherited a Roth IRA from her aunt in 2018. Her aunt was 78 when she passed and had held the Roth for over 20 years. Beatrice was 63 at the time. Under the old rules, Beatrice takes annual RMDs from the inherited Roth based on her single life expectancy, but those distributions are tax-free because the account is a Roth, and the 5-year holding period was long since met by her aunt. Beatrice is quietly receiving tax-free growth and tax-free distributions on inherited money for the rest of her projected lifetime. Her annual RMD at age 71 in 2026 is about $16,000 from a balance that has grown to $400,000 despite distributions. $16,000 in tax-free income per year, layered on top of her Social Security and pension, is a substantial supplement that does not push her into a higher tax bracket or trigger IRA surcharges. She is one of the luckiest retirees in her zip code, and she knows it. There's also a subtle advantage to the stretch structure that many retirees underestimate. Because the distributions are spread over a long life expectancy, the annual amount is often small relative to your total income. A $12,000 distribution from a stretched inherited traditional IRA layered on top of $40,000 in Social Security and $20,000 in pension income may not push you into a higher tax bracket, may not trigger higher Medicare premiums, and may not cause more of your Social Security to become taxable. The same $400,000 inherited under the 10-year rule would force distributions averaging $40,000 or $50,000 a year, which can trigger all three of those consequences simultaneously. Let me address spousal beneficiaries separately because the rules are different. If you inherited an IRA from your spouse, you have several options. You can roll the account into your own IRA, treating it as if it were always yours. This is usually the best choice if you are younger than your deceased spouse and want to delay RMDs until your own required beginning date. You can also treat it as an inherited IRA and take stretched distributions, which can be useful if you need the distributions now and want to avoid the 10% early withdrawal penalty if you are under 59.5. The Secure Act did not change these spousal options substantially, so the decision tree is similar to what it was before 2020, but the calculations depend on your age, your spouse's age, and your cash flow needs. And this is one of the areas where professional guidance is most valuable. There is one more consideration worth mentioning. The 2024 final regulations clarified that beneficiaries who inherited under the old rules must continue to take annual RMDs, rather than waiting until the final year to take the full balance. Some retirees had tried to defer distributions for years and then take a lump sum. That strategy has been explicitly rejected. If you are under the old rules, you must take an RMD every year, calculated using the appropriate divisor. Skipping years is not allowed, and missed distributions trigger the Secure Act 2.0 penalties. Now, what do you actually do if you are in this lucky situation? First, confirm with your custodian that your inherited IRA is properly titled and that the correct RMD calculation is being used. If the custodian is using a divisor that does not reflect the 2022 reset tables, ask them to correct it. Second, review your own beneficiary designation on the inherited account. Make sure it names the people you intend to inherit it from you. Remember that those successor beneficiaries will be subject to the 10-year rule, not the stretch, so plan accordingly. Third, consider whether your annual RMD should be taken in cash or in kind. You can transfer securities directly to a taxable account as part of the RMD, preserving the investment while satisfying the distribution requirement. This can be useful if you do not need the cash and want to avoid selling during a down market. Fourth, if you have multiple inherited IRAs from different decedents, confirm they are maintained as separate accounts with separate RMD calculations. Fifth, if you are charitably inclined and over 70.5, explore whether qualified charitable distributions can be made from your inherited traditional IRA. QCDs can be made from inherited IRAs as well as your own, subject to the same rules, and they can further reduce your taxable distributions. I want to acknowledge a larger reality. The Secure Act was a significant change in retirement policy, and many planners believe the tax revenue generated by the 10-year rule is substantial. There is a non-trivial possibility that at some point Congress will revisit the grandfather clause, though as of 2026, no such legislation is pending. The practical implication is that if you are under the old rules, the current treatment is not guaranteed to last forever. It is wise to maximize the strategic value of the stretch while the rules are in your favor. That does not mean accelerating distributions, which would defeat the purpose. It means making sure your documentation is clean, your beneficiary designations are current, and your tax planning takes full advantage of the flexibility the old rules provide. Let me cover one more practical point about the interaction between inherited IRAs and your own retirement accounts. For RMD purposes, inherited IRAs and your own IRAs are tracked separately. Your inherited IRA RMD must be taken from the inherited IRA specifically. You cannot aggregate an inherited IRA RMD with your own IRA RMD, even if both are at the same custodian. Similarly, if you have multiple inherited IRAs from different decedents, each one must have its RMD taken separately. This is in contrast to your own traditional IRAs, which can have their RMDs aggregated and taken from any one of the accounts, provided the total RMD amount is satisfied. Getting this wrong triggers the Secure Act 2.0 missed RMD penalty, which starts at 25% and is reduced to 10% if corrected within the correction window. The penalty is waivable in many cases by filing Form 5329 with a reasonable cause explanation, but the cleanest path is to get it right in the first place. Set calendar reminders for each inherited IRA RMD, confirm the amounts with your custodian, and take the distributions well before the December 31st deadline to allow time for any processing delays. If you know someone who inherited an IRA before 2020, share this video with them. Many of these beneficiaries are sitting on a significant tax benefit they do not fully understand. Their custodian may not have automatically updated their divisor. Their advisor may not have walked them through the successor beneficiary rules. Their spouse may inherit this account someday and need to understand what they are receiving. The clarity provided by a single conversation about the old stretch rules can translate into tens of thousands of dollars of tax savings over retirement. If you, or the lucky beneficiary, treat your inherited IRA with the care it deserves. Keep good records, take your RMDs on time, update your beneficiary designations, and consider yourself part of a vanishing class of retirees who are still operating under a tax regime most Americans no longer have access to. That is a genuine gift, and it is worth protecting with clear-eyed planning for the rest of your life.